And recording. So, awesome. Excited. Loki won. Let's do it. Wanted to ask what your thoughts were, kind of very quick, kind of general, a little bit of if you had any thoughts before you started watching the show, things that you think might want to highlight in anticipation of it coming out.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was just kind of excited. It seemed kind of just to me, just from the brief marketing I had seen, that it was a show that was more in the vein of WandaVision than it was Falcon Winter Soldier, which appealed to me because I personally enjoyed WandaVision a bit more. There's a central mystery, there's some supernatural elements involved, some meddling with time, whether it's like who knows exactly what, but it's like all these aspects were appealing to me and seemed a bit more up my alley than Falcon Winter Soldier was. I enjoyed it, but so I was excited in that respect, and of course I love Tom Hiddleston's Loki, so and he seemed, from what little I saw, to be not to be floating in or just cashing a check. He was very much invested still. All those, honestly, like Loki might have been my most anticipated of the Marvel Disney Plus shows. If I had to guess, if I got to think them through, but like WandaVision was up there, but Loki, once I saw it, sort of got a sense of the premise and it's thought about its implications. Yeah, I was pretty excited. What about you?
I like reacting to things you say. I agree. I was both more excited for Loki than I would have been for Falcon Winter Soldier, as well as I enjoyed WandaVision a lot, and thinking that it would be in a similar vein, and them having what I would say delivered well on WandaVision. I thought like, okay, cool, maybe they can deliver well on Loki.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Something that picking up on what you just said, I was thinking is that like I knew Loki takes the Tesseract. Like I try and avoid spoilers as much as I can, but there's some basic tenets that and I thought it'd be some sort of multiverse hopping, multi-dimensional time travel, something like this sort of type movie, which of course is central to WandaVision, right? Super central.
Yeah.
And so I was almost afraid, and I guess that fear wasn't totally dissuaded because there's still a lot more of the show to go. But I was thinking, how is Loki going to stand out and be different, and also be good, knowing what WandaVision did? Because if they just, very very close repeat, that'd be a letdown too for us as the audience. And the other big thought I had is, I just think it's so interesting with almost with Loki more than the other characters. Maybe that's controversial. I think that there's this balance that Marvel having to play with these TV shows. These aren't new properties. Like Loki is an established character. We've seen him many times through the films. The audience kind of gets to know him. And you both are playing this game where one level, there's like nostalgia and callbacks and the benefits of kind of relating back to the earlier movies, but also the necessity to make your own unique, interesting, different TV show that is, sufficiently, not like the.
Yeah, it's self-sufficient. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It both honors what came before it, but is also, you can watch it in a vacuum and it's still a self-contained story. So yeah,
exactly.
So massively, yeah. I mean, and also other layers of complexity on top that we'll get into about sort of this particular iteration of the character that they have to deal with when it comes to character development. So
yeah,
but yeah.
So these are the things I was kind of thinking of. That's a bit of a challenge they got. Tom Hiddleston's done such a good job so far. It's interesting to see, where is he going to go. And the other thing is, of course, while we've seen the character a lot, this is sort of a different version of the character because of the necessary difference in the timeline. So how similar is he going to be to what we've already seen versus maybe is he going to kind of, maybe this, these events are going to change him in some ways, and is Tom Hiddleston going to use that to have a different take on the character? I was very curious about that, and we'll get into that, kind of very early on. But for now, should we jump into that first scene that establishes the show?
Sure. Yeah.
So we get that kind of overview of New York. We see the kind of the text come up. We see whether, depending on how you call it, whether it's a scene from Avengers 1 or Avengers Endgame. I guess those exact scenes were more seen in Endgame than in Avengers 1, but there's a bit of mixing. What you had kind of establishing the timeline. Where are we? Which is things we've seen: the end of the Battle of New York. We have more focus on Loki in these like in this retelling of these scenes. There's a bit of humor, a bit of jokes, kind of establishes the tone for maybe the whole show, and then of course him escaping with the Tesseract.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, you have that sort of opening master of New York. It's pretty much shot for shot ripped from Endgame with some editing and some trimming there, cutting the fat. I mean, basically, essentially like resetting the stage. Reminding people it's the highest grossing film of all time. So it's a great place to start, the most successful place to start, and the most logical place to start this particular iteration again of Loki. And like you said, yeah, there were sort of some inserts that were Loki specific, and then some other aspects, like again, you mentioned the text. That text was kind of like reminiscent or evocative of like an analog clock, so which is foreshadowing of an aesthetic that
The
will come
text
later
overlay on New York.
Yeah,
That's a great
2012 in New York, which is again sort of foreshadowing of an aesthetic that will come sort of play a much larger role later on in the episode, and I'm sure the series. But it's and then not just that, but also the music. There were sort of slight changes to the filmic, not just the mise en scène, but just like the actual sort of like non-diegetic aspects of that scene that made it sort of very clear that hey, like this is Loki's. This is we're starting at the same point. We've seen this already, but now we're taking it from Loki's perspective. This is Loki's story. Again, sort of that insert of Loki sort of giving a cheeky goodbye to Hulk, which didn't appear in Endgame, and then cutting pretty much everything out from the stairwell itself and just cutting right to from Loki's point of view, what's happening at the bottom, which of course is the Tesseract of the cube getting knocked away and put right in his path, and then of course he disappears and we get the beginning of Loki's story. So I think it was a good way to it was very concise, quick, but also like a good way to start from a known point. No one is
exactly.
It's the most successful point to start with. Everyone's seen
this before. If you've seen Avengers 1 and no other film, you kind of know where we are.
Yeah.
If you've seen Endgame and no other film, you'd be able to know where we are.
Those
are two of the biggest movies of the last who knows how many years.
Exactly.
So the thing I wanted to pick up, two things that you said that I think you're completely right. One is like the little wave. There were lots of little humorous aspects, and that whole scene is quick. It's like a minute or something. So they have like this funny, jokey little kind of just little bits in it. The wave, him turning to Captain America and kind of mocking him. There's the Hulk stairs joke is played out a couple times. Hulk hates stairs, and then when he goes to pick up the Tesseract, it's kind of a funny. There's a look left and right in a kind of comical way before picking it up and poofing out of there.
Tom Hiddleston's an underrated physical comedy actor.
Yeah, so in little time, they have this quite a good amount of humor, which I think is trying to set up the tone for the show, which is he's the god of mischief, so we're leading him more into the comedic or humorous aspects, which Marvel has done, and they do have jokes, but some properties more than others. Some properties take themselves more seriously, and some are more lighthearted, and we know where this is going to fall. And the second one is, while doing a great job of setting it up, it's quick. They didn't dwell. They could have just milked a lot of kind of old scene stuff, or they could have done a montage of different kind of Loki. I guess there's, we'll see it later on, but it was efficient, the time used to establish, move on, and begin the new story, ending that scene with the green Marvel logo and Loki.
Yep.
After that, we get that desert scene where he arrives at the Tesseract, and then, of course, there's the entrance through those portals of the agents of the TVA with a little bit of dialogue there. Kind of curious what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, I mean, you'd mentioned when we been talking about earlier how it was very evocative of that one shot or that sort of sequence from Iron Man where
I believe that was a heavy reference visually. Desert scene, single man kind of crash land somewhere. He doesn't really know where he is. Like Iron Man kind of like rockets out and crashes. Like this guy teleports out and
no, but it was
kind of crashes.
I mean,
the scanning over the desert onto the character.
It was very much looked. Yeah, I mean,
and of course, Iron Man 1, such an important film. It kicked off the entire cinematic universe.
Started his hero's journey. This is presumably the start of like this version of Loki's redemptive arc or hero's journey in some ways. So like it seemed like a very specific or deliberate call out. But
Not very good at the hero's journey is, but what's the moment where kind of the adventure kicks off? Is it the call to action?
inciting incident, yeah, it could call to action.
Inciting incident.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the inciting incident really is of this whole show is the arrival of the TVA, right? That's where
Yeah, well, I mean, it's you could pinpoint. You get Loki taking the Tesseract, which apparently is what caused the TVA. But yeah, it's all no, I think so. You're right. Like there was that. Dolly very reminiscent of the very first film in the MCU, which in many ways might be sort of, you could read into it in a number of ways. You could say like, yeah, just it's Loki's hero's journey began, just like Tony Stark's hero's journey began back in 2008. It also could be like anything of like, this is the start of the next set. Like we had the Infinity Saga, and that was we had that, some codas to the Infinity Saga with the Spider-Man Far From Home, all these other things. But really, this is your true introduction into what we're really doing in phase 4 onwards, basically. Like who is this? What's the overarching saga going to be over these maybe this next decade or whatever?
Yeah.
Who knows? But anyway, so then obviously he encounters the Mongolian natives. We have a bit of comedy there with him sort of speaking to them and them not understanding him, and sort of his classic kind of like that. This is going to be used a lot, but like his feeling of superiority not being reflected back to him. Like he has this.
What I think is interesting, and this is the point where it really begins, is we saw the jokes that Loki has used in the past. That Captain America imitation thing, I think that was in Endgame, right? And that does feel like the Loki we've seen so far, his style of comedy and the comedy that we get when that character's on screen, mocking, playful, mischievous. Here, we see the beginning of what, at least for this episode, at least, is a pretty established pattern where
it's a recurring
Loki gives this, his big speech, thinks he's kind of this big guy, very melodramatic, and they don't understand him. And Loki taking himself super seriously, and then the kind of situation around him not agreeing with that is a very heavy pattern. We're going to see that a lot through the episode until kind of Loki kind of drops that act a little bit, which we'll eventually see. But for now, like this is the first time we see it, and it's slightly funny. The Mongolians kind of being like what or whatever, or speaking in a different language, and then him kind of giving up on it himself a little bit there and being like, "Oh, don't worry about it." He walks over to get the Tesseract or whatever it was. And then after see the Mongols, we see the entrance to the portals of the TVA. What was your thoughts on that scene, seeing them for the first time? What were your thoughts when you saw them, if you didn't know who they were?
Yeah, I think the entrance of the TVA was interesting. I mean, like, the fact that they chose the character they did, kind of this, not a superimposing figure. She's dressed in this, this like, I don't know, 60s era SWAT garb.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like this. You've got the God of Mischief Zone just going up and utilizing what to this point we've felt is the greatest power in the universe, and then him going up against this seeming lackey or whatever of some unknown but presumably like bureaucratic organization, and like she just completely she owns him. She like utilizes the tools at her disposal and kind of just takes him out. Or not takes him out, but essentially like she clearly establishes a hierarchy that we were not aware of, or certainly Loki wasn't aware of going into it. And again, that's call back to the same kind of recurring theme of comedy that you called out there, which is to say that this episode's all about cutting Loki down. Hopefully they don't sort of, it seems that, I won't get ahead of myself, but hopefully that in further episodes like 2 through 6, they don't lean so heavily on that dynamic, which I don't think they will, but who knows. But certainly this is kind of like a continuation of that dynamic where it's like we have a certain sort of in our mind hierarchy or power scale or sort of set of characters that we believe can do certain things to other sets of characters, and then that's completely the rug is taken out from under us. So bit of comedy with like Loki, like the getting hit and sort of having to experience all that, and
he gets time twisted in the desert already, right? That's where he starts. Slap the necklace on or whatever,
and then he gets they put the collar on him after, and some more physical comedy there. But yeah,
No,
what other
I
people are
agree.
doing.
The outfits were super unassuming. I remember thinking watching this and like being like, oh, okay, so we like run out of budget here. Like, what the hell is up with these outfits?
Right.
Whoever this was, I've been trying to not stay away from what happens in these shows as much as I can and keep myself in the dark. Whether it was a kind of shield-like division of Earth or some sort of intergalactic kind of the Nova Corps style, a police force. I just, I looked at those outfits and I was just like, what are they playing at? Of course, they had the portals behind them and
And you're
that kind
wondering,
of
like, am I
little
supposed to be
baton with
intimidated
the
by these
light up
people?
thing. So that it clearly shows that, they're technologically capable. And the two things just didn't go together at all. But of course, that foreshadows an aesthetic that will fit in perfectly. It just looked super strange to me that moment in time. It was it was like for me it was like seeing the Nova Corps and like a little bobby hat. It just
Yeah.
didn't feel right at all. But it worked well, and having these people kind of doing their job and not taking Loki too seriously, it is quite funny. The joke does wear eventually
Yeah.
as we jump into the TVA and we continue seeing it and a few more things. So
Yeah.
they take him through the portal. He goes through the kind of different sequence of steps or rooms of the bureaucracy of the TVA. Starting off with that first room with the receptionist who takes the tesseract. The receptionist you did mention you recognized.
Yeah, that's Pillboy from The Good Place. Amazing character. Yeah, I mean, like that this entire sequence that you're referencing, him being taken to the TVA and that sort of that I guess I don't know registration process that he has to go through, all those steps again, sort of harping on the same kind of underlying joke as to say like, this organization treating, people of power, objects of power, things that have been established over the course of over a decade in this universe as something, things not to be trifled with. This organization treating those things and people as just more boxes to check, more forms to fill out, more red tape to manage. Just like just another part of their bureaucratic, you know, conveyor belt. So like it was just kind of they kept going on. There were some like slight idiosyncratic sort of like changes, like jokes they made around that, but that was a central sort of like comedic theme that they kept coming back to. So like,
and then the other thing I think we want to comment on is I liked it. The TVA's aesthetic, the anachronistic nature of kind of 50s vibe, sort of kind of atomic age 50s, almost.
60s,
yeah, almost kind of like what I mean by atomic age, kind of like the Fallout sort of aesthetic. I mean,
Fallout's
far future, but let's not get too into that.
50s, 60s,
in terms of what
like,
time I'm
like
referring to.
Shag carpet, yellow green aesthetic.
Yeah, and then the bulbous computers,
bulbous TVs.
Yes,
yes.
And, I love the aesthetic. I just am into it. I'm quite a big fan of things from like that sort of era. I thought that it kind of worked well with itself, and I liked how you had both references kind of that timeline, and then of course you had twists. So you had the robot, remember the one that takes off his outfit, but which is both kind of very advanced piece of technology, so it appears, but it did seem that it kind of fit and had that silly little screen with the very basic faces. So despite being kind of advanced, it kind of played well, and it didn't feel out of place. Like if you would put I'm trying to think of like a very advanced I don't know, like one of the robots from Interstellar in there. I think that would look like strange
or something. It wasn't bleeding edge looking.
Yeah.
It was
and I thought that was excellent. I really liked that. The mundaneness and having like the least important, like in the hierarchy, it seemed to be that receptionist or pillboy was the lowest ranked in this kind of very hierarchical bureaucracy, and like that he was handed the time stone. I mean, we're going to talk more about that later because it's an important scene relating to that. But I thought that just that little establishing that and how he's handed the Tesseract. It's not even something that's kept, even if it's
they don't
it's not even kept and given to a high-ranking official by these kind of police force. It's given to the receptionist to put in the evidence locker. And I really liked it. I thought it was good. The joke did wear out a bit, but they had twists on jokes. Some that I thought worked, some that I didn't. This is Asgardian leather. take himself seriously, kind of having been put down. It did feel on one hand that a couple things. One, like we know Loki to be an intelligent, maybe he is arrogant, but he's an intelligent character at the end of the day. And it didn't scan for me very well. I mean, he was having a hell of a day. I mean, that's the day of the Battle of New York, right? Like he came off of that. So he's having a hell of a day, but still, I don't know if we can excuse his inability to start like realizing that he's not the boss. I mean, he's still so haughty through the entire process. We'll get to later on where that leads up, but and when it kind of stops, but it's a very long time, and that didn't feel right to me as the character of Loki. I think Loki would, the Loki I know and love hate, but admire him as I think he's a great villain. Is he would probably want to be quiet and respectful and somehow try and manipulate, con, cheat, and harness and steal the huge amount of kind of power and resources of the people around him. Because he does kind of later in the episode, but it's not his initial approach. And I think that didn't scan for me, that you wouldn't quite quickly try and understand and then hopefully harness or take whenever he sees, someone with much more power than he's used to for himself.
I don't necessarily know if he'd internalized yet that was the case, that there was a new hierarchy that he had to sort of then take into account. And so I think that was, and again, we talked about the pivotal scene coming later that truly, forces him to
realize, to readjust the value.
Point, he's still thinking, he still thinks he's got a trump card. He still thinks he's got something in his back pocket that these people aren't aware of. He's still I think he's maybe taking the facade or the window dressing for the substance behind what's going on in this organization and not truly understanding what's actually going on.
And then and the last thing I want to say is, I was talking about how, I think Loki, I don't know if they quite did the character justice for kind of just repeat for the sake of kind of repeating the same joke. There's the same theme of a joke. And then some of the jokes didn't quite make sense. There's this part where he's pre and post this scene with the little archway. He's so haughty and I'm the god of mischief and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I do agree.
And then they tell him, walk through here if you're like not a robot. And then he has that whole like, wait, what if I am a robot thing? But like that didn't scan. He's super self-assured and he's this, either have him like kind of maybe that's the moment of realization where he's like, at this point, given what I've seen so far, I know nothing maybe, and I have to kind of maybe acquiesce. And maybe as well as my whole worldview being shaken, maybe on top of that, I'm a robot. That kind of would have been funny if that played out, but he didn't. He just kind of had this momentary doubt on a question that he seemed to have no business to doubt, and then later on shows extreme confidence in himself again. So I just want to talk about kind of that and how because as much as I really praise the episode overall, I think it's important to kind of talk about the bits where things.
I agree. I think that seemed like it came off as the writers using an opportunity to make a joke without sort of truly vetting whether that joke scanned or
that joke would have worked with so many characters. The humor of you doubting whether you've always been a robot, but not for this character in that situation.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, so let's go through like these different parts too. Like, 'cause I think there were some jokes that I actually appreciate.
So we started with the receptionist room.
Yeah, you got
and then the evidence locker, which is that alone is fairly funny, and it's called a tesseract or something.
And you have like the first introduction, the true introduction of what the time twisters do, which is like Loki making a run for it, and then
the time twister. Yep.
Yeah, and then her bringing back Loki every time, sort of like again, sort of starting to establish like who's really running the show here.
Yeah. Then you have the series of rooms. You have the one with the layers, robot. Everything you've said, do you confirm that this is everything you've ever said?
Yeah.
That I thought, by the way, great joke.
That was funny.
A lot. And him saying one line. And I quite liked that they didn't belabor that point. I was really afraid they were going to stay for ages. And have paper after paper after paper. I love I had 2 papers and he's just like, he doesn't like flip through or anything. So like check whether like this is vaguely me. He just that second piece of paper comes out and he just acknowledges like whether I care about this enough that I want to argue it, or whether I've just accepted that like they're not fucking up here and they have. This is everything I've said. He just takes that pen and signs it off in 2 pages. That I thought was great. Then the robot. Then we had the archway. And then I think we get into, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're in the room with the tickets. and that leads
Mhm.
us to talk about the cartoon.
Yep. Yep.
Unless I
So,
missed something. Did I miss something?
I mean, we could mention the sort of hedge fund, trust fund
Oh,
baby, Brett,
yeah, I
you
didn't
know,
know if I
who,
fully got what was going on there. Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of odd. They just like it's someone who is so privileged or so spoiled that he's presented with this otherworldly dimension, and who knows what his actual backstory is. But if he's presumably from Earth, and he just he's still not taking him seriously. He doesn't take the ticket. Doesn't sort of. He's like, no, and then of course he pays
What
for that.
kind of bothered me about that bit is the guy was like too similar to Loki. Does that scan?
Yeah, I think
In
it was
terms of
meant to
personality, it
be.
was the same thing. It's arrogant male, white male with long black hair. I guess the allegory and point is, when he gets reset, is for Loki to
Yeah,
realize, like,
start
okay,
to
maybe I
realize
gotta
like, oh shit, like not
keep
like
my mouth shut.
yeah.
But I don't think they needed him to be
No, I
quite
mean
so
it was
exaggeratedly
a
similar.
little.
What I thought they were gonna do is, which I thought would have been hilarious, is that is a multiverse somehow version of Loki, and his father runs a hedge fund or something, and
I don't know.
like
It could.
it's just I don't know. I
It
thought
seemed
that, I
like there
thought
was
that was gonna
probably.
be Loki.
It seemed like there was a bit more that could have been done with that joke. They just ended up
Yeah,
just
there
using
was
it.
there
Yeah,
was
it's like a
something that
learning
didn't quite scan for me. Or if
opportunity
you
for
were
the
gonna do
kid.
if you are trying to do someone different, I thought you could do someone more different. I don't know. Those are kind of my thoughts on that. But it did serve the purpose of we see him getting reset.
Yeah,
Now we're in the room with the tickets,
yeah.
and
Loki takes
one of the things
another
is
sort of
he
example of the
was so.
bureaucracy.
Here's something I will give him credit for. That character was so immediately unlikable. It made, I think, us as an audience back Loki slightly more,
Sure, yeah, act as a
who at
foil
the end
that
of the
kind of
day
we
is
saw
the main
Loki in a
character of
bit
the
more
show, is
sympathetic of a
kind of
way.
the
Yeah,
hero of the show, and therefore is someone who, because we know what he's like, he's arrogant, he just rained hell in New York. We are trying to get the audience on his side, and by having this guy who's more immediately annoying,
yeah,
where the list of his crimes is bigger, is
yeah. Maybe
very
he's not a
unlikely.
genocidal maniac, but he's like, yeah,
Very
privileged,
unlikely that
like
Loki is,
rich white guy.
especially when
Yeah,
he's
but
just numb. But yeah, should we move on to the cartoon?
yeah. So obviously Loki, there's a cartoon playing in one of those bulbous sort of cathode ray 60s era TVs you were talking about. Kind of a classic, nuclear era, like almost like those safety like nuclear era videos you'd see, or like PSAs that you get. And obviously it's the main sort of point or note of exposition in the episodes, sort of describing sort of the
Yeah,
concept of what
it's
the
it's where
TVA
we
is.
we get a bunch of our questions answered right up front,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Uh,
let's tell, like, you
and
got
fodder for
questions, this is
more
how we're gonna do
questions.
it.
So obviously we've got sort of the introduction of the idea of a single sacred timeline, the fact that
Hmm.
other timelines can exist, and the fact that this apparently, according to TVA, led to some multiversal war. One timeline, one out. The timekeepers, these three sort of like very like powerful
Godlike
beings,
beings.
yeah, are the sort of arbiters of this sacred timeline, and through TVA and via the TVA, essentially this organization they've set up. They've created everyone in TVA, evidently. They've created them. And yeah, essentially sort of control the timeline and try to stop it from. They didn't sort of go into many of the rules, the underlying mechanics of it, but you got the sacred timeline, and then you've got branches, these variants they call them, coming off the sacred timeline, and there are these thresholds past which these branches become their own self-sufficient parallel
Yeah,
branches, apparently. And why it's the case, who knows? But like apparently you
yeah,
cannot let it get past that threshold, whatever.
yeah.
So
Which, by the way,
um,
can we talk about how in those little scenes, which we've seen already so far in the show, with that threshold, we seemed to be extremely close to them.
yeah, right.
Like, yeah,
Well, I
they're
mean
not
the
doing like a great job of giving themselves buffer. They seem to be
classic, yeah,
extremely
movie
close.
timing or whatever, where it's like, it's
Yeah, the
same,
bomb is always stopped with 1 second to go
yeah,
or
or like
something.
Fast and Furious 9, where it's like, whatever, like it takes like, 6 minutes for a plane to like leave the tarmac or something. It's like, like seems like that branch timeline is like moving at a very fast clip, and it's like very fast approaching that threshold. Like literally, we'll get there in 2 seconds, and they're just kind of like, oh, like whatever, like you know. But yeah,
Yeah,
no, yeah, no. So it was interesting, honestly. Like answered some questions, also provided fodder for probably even more questions. Like, okay, so who are these timekeepers? Like,
Yeah.
what is their actual true purpose? They sort of say that they want to prevent or preempt a war, I guess, or unnecessary
Or
destruction.
just whatever,
But
yeah, the
but
fallout
what
is.
is that actually like? It seems pretty obvious that there are some sort of more underlying nefarious motives at work here. Who knows? And who the timekeepers are in relation to some other villains we've heard about. And we can talk about it later, but there are we can talk about sort of Kang the Conqueror, who's obviously very sort of whose city was seen in Ant-Man 2, and who's been already cast, being one of those timekeepers, which would scan like seem to sort of mesh well with the character from the comics, and then this idea that they're playing into the multiverse going forward. But anyway, so
Yeah,
all these sort of questions have been sort of this foundation, this like fact base that we've been given, kind of like provide some fodder for all those questions moving forward. But it was good. It was well. I think it was well executed. It was like
yeah, I
fit with
agree.
the aesthetic, a good way to sort of provide the exposition that was needed, or at least just enough information so that the audience uh, has some now context to use, but also has more questions that I'm sure will be addressed in
For
the coming
sure.
episodes.
And I'll say this through that kind of scene. Look, they adhere to the aesthetic because it was more like a 50s cartoon. It was like an old like an old kind of Disney cartoon or something. The styling. It was visually kind of interesting. It breaks it up, it draws you in, it changes things while also scanning. And yes, it was a little, I think, self congratulatory, and like, look at how clever we are at doing exposition without having to do,
Mm-hmm.
a character just give a massive speech at some point where we just tell you all the answers. So as a
Yeah.
way of doing it, I mean, there are things that like if you just the thing about exposition is always like it's usually just there for the purpose of explaining it to the audience, not that it's necessarily needed to be known in the scene or in context. That's kind of the great problem of exposition. But in this scene, why would you? I guess telling so Loki is like going to be judged next, and I guess telling him a little bit about like what crime he's done and the organization he's in would help him before the trial. But
Yeah, I mean, like,
it didn't
right.
seem that seeing the trial didn't seem like it was very supposed to be prepared. They weren't
Yeah, it's
care
been a
if he was
kangaroo court
prepared.
anyway,
So
so
it didn't
why are
seem
you?
like there
Yeah,
was a time to give you much information. And
right.
anything, he seemed to have, it just gave him more fodder to argue back, but it wasn't like a true trial where you care whether the person's, well represented or prepared or informed of the
No,
law. It wasn't assigned an attorney, by the state. It was like a kind of a mock trial
it was
almost.
a
It
kangaroo
definitely
court.
felt
It
that
was
way.
just like, yeah, it was.
And it was a formality, total formality, and he was given the opportunity to argue, but it seemed that there was no set of words he could have said unless there's some kind of secret thing he could have
Yeah,
invoked that would have made him any difference. They barely seemed to pay attention. They just seemed very kind of bored.
yeah,
And so I don't know, like the cartoon really made sense to put it in that room for this character at that moment in time. But of course, it does well. It does a good job at explaining
yeah.
things
No, I
to us,
agree. I
the
think there
audience.
was, if you try to really, if you examine or scrutinize that part of it, there's not much in universe logic to really have it. It does sort of, you know, align well with the aesthetic and the idea that
Yep.
this is all sort of one big mundane bureaucracy. So but you're right in terms of like this was a kangaroo court that he was walking into, not a
Yep.
real trial where he had any sort of chance of actually defending himself. So like, why provide any information to these people? But yeah, you're right. It's kind of like it was just a cute kind of like window dressed way of telling, not showing. It was truly just a bunch of exposition.
Yep.
But it is what it is.
So moving on to, so I'm going to move on to one of the things we see now is we are first introduced to Owen Wilson's character in that French church.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I want to say one thing more thing about
okay.
the
Oh, sorry.
judge, Gugumbatu Ra, who plays, and I don't remember the character's name, but she is actually like someone who was once a romantic interest, evidently, of King the Conqueror. So something interesting to note there.
Super. Yeah. Let's maybe leave like the predictions and stuff like that.
Now, I'm not making predictions. I'm just saying, like, there was that character there in that trial scene, and that judge is a much more important character that I think maybe casual viewers would have given her credit for. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, Oh, the trial. No, I'm gonna get to the trial scene properly. Sorry, I kind of jumped a bit there. That was my fault.
Sure.
Because the Owen Wilson scene actually comes just between the
Yeah.
cartoon and
Yeah.
the trial.
Yeah.
I know, I jumped to the trial a bit, but sorry, it was an aside. That's something. The Owen Wilson scene establishing. So that's when we get kind of well, we see a group of kind of slain soldiers or bureaucrats or task force, whatever they are, just like the one that went to fetch Loki. So we've established like what success looks like in their world and what has happened this time. The other thing, I have a bit more. So now we see that there's like another level of they're more of like a foot soldier or a regular kind of police officer. Then Owen Wilson character seems to be some sort of detective or maybe like FBI to the police or something. He's kind of one level further, and he is giving it a good amount of authority with respect to the people he's treated. It seems clear. It very quickly shows his humanity. God knows what. I mean, that was a problematic word. God knows what kind of organism or creature he truly is, but I'm using that word.
Yeah.
When he sees the little boy and talks to him briefly. So it establishes like a bit more about like the TVA and that. We know, these people, the slain soldiers, like shouldn't be happening. We're getting that, and then yes, of course, he talks to the boy, and then there's that reference at the end where he says, "Who did this?" And he points at a stained glass window of the devil. And I've got to tell you, man, I've spent a good amount of time in churches, and I've never seen anything even close to. Did you remember that scene? It's such a glorified. It's like a devil. It's like the devil, and he's got like it's very heroic. Like he's the centerpiece. You see like a little devil in the corner sometimes because that's what's going on in that stained glass, but he's the center and he looks like almost a messianic feature. What the hell church is this? It looked like maybe a satanic church, but no, Christian. I mean, who's got a stained glass window like that?
Yeah.
It was horrifying.
Yeah.
And the boy kind of meekly pointing at it. Sorry, that was me just going off a bit, but I couldn't help myself. I was like, what the hell is that thing doing?
It was kind of weird. It's like you're walking to the church, like, okay, like what's going on here?
Yeah, but it was creepily in the way the boy, it was well done. The delivery and very ominous, quietly, silently pointing at the thing.
I think it was a little girl.
Oh my God, was it? Did I say little boy?
Yeah, it's okay.
No. Sorry, was it not a boy?
I think it was a girl. Yeah.
I mean, but hey, it's 2021, man. These French peasants can present as they choose. Z was pointing at the.
Yeah, but no, it was. Yeah, they leaned hard into the devil allegory, and I think obviously sort of like I think you're meant to get the idea that okay, like whoever this attacker was, like it had in some way was reminiscent of the devil both visually and just the things they did. So you get a sense. Then you think like, oh, like Loki is well known for his headdress, like
So I thought it was a like a mislead, like
sure.
So the guy's like, I think he's like red and he has two small horns. And so I was like, oh, you want us to think of like Loki, but I know he's got those big ass horns, and I don't think this kid. And so maybe it's like a guy who's like red or something. I thought it was a purposeful mislead to the audience with having the. I really didn't take the horn seriously at all. I was like, the horns don't scan, doesn't look like Loki. Because remember, Loki's got those giant ram's horns. And so I was like, okay, I kind of see what you're doing there, but like, nah, I'm not listening to it. Shows what I know. Let's see that.
Well, who knows? I mean, it's
who knows? Maybe let's not get too into that. Anything else? So I want to say Owen Wilson, well cast. I thought it was very strong. I thought it was just strong. Yeah. I was a little afraid knowing him and like the kind of roles he plays. And when I first saw him, I was like, oh God, is he gonna be like trying to be like excessively like comedic and funny while trying to play like a detective role where he's supposed to be serious? And is this like not gonna work and it's not gonna scan? I liked it. I thought it was good. I thought his performance was quite strong. What about you?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a sort of tough balance to strike to sort of both fit in well with the kind of banal Kafkaesque like multi-layered organization, kind of feel that TVA is going for, but also sort of come off as different, someone with a personality, and to fit into with this 60s, 70s aesthetic. He's got this sort of porn star mustache going, but still have his Owen Wilson charm thrown in there. He doesn't exactly say wow or anything like too much, but he's still like, you can tell it's Owen Wilson.
Sorry, do that again.
Like wow. Is you don't like he towed that line, I think, well. I think likable. I think there's like an undercurrent of like, I think there's like a very sort of soft undercurrent of like something sinister simmering beneath the surface there still. Obviously with TVA, I think we'll see obviously what happens with that, but like he like, so all of those aspects are difficult to capture. Someone who's like sympathetic, someone who clearly knows more than he's letting on, who's part of this very bureaucratic body or entity, but also like is different and unique in some odd ways.
And I like the incent very quickly. I'm moving on. It's still Owen Wilson's character. It's the scene where he's talking to I think it's the officer that arrested Loki, and he's like, "Oh, I just need to talk to him," and he's like, "This is a terrible idea," and blah blah blah. There was something I didn't like about that scene, but I liked how very quickly you're establishing he's some kind of maverick, and I do things my own way. I'm up to here, Kowinski. I want your gun and your badge.
Your gun and your badge.
My sciatica can't take this anymore. No, but I did, very quickly establish that, which is good because at the end of the day, the TVA is dreadful. Like, it's a bureaucracy. It's you don't want a rule. You don't care much for any of the characters who are terribly rule following and just kind of more faceless drones in this organization. And the fact that it quickly establishes Owen Wilson as kind of doing his own thing within it, I thought was a very another thing I commend the show. It pulls you into his character more, and you quickly care about him, as well as the small things like establishing the care for the French.
It was well cast, certainly. I think he's the right character for that.
Okay, should we move on a little bit?
Yeah.
The next thing we have is the courtroom scene, and then of course that he rejoins. That ends with Owen Wilson at the end of it, so it still kind of aligns. I talked about how it was a bit of a kangaroo court, but what were your thoughts on the scene?
Yeah, I mean so it's like you say, it's sort of a summary, just like there's no actual, it's not a real trial. It's all theater, and they sort of reference, you have the judge there, who obviously, as I said, sort of is actually maybe a bit more of a pivotal character than her brief appearance in that in this episode maybe let on. And then of course another sort of establishment of the hierarchy, like you have Owen Wilson going from looking up to her, and like there's clearly like he is below her. He's like some sort of, he's not exactly middle management, but like she is above him
I mean, just referencing life, our society. No, she can be a judge, and he seemed to be a high-ranking police officer. He's like a judge to a detective.
So
maybe they work together because they're in the legal system. But a judge is superior to a detective, especially inside of a court of law.
Yeah. So we'll
so that an allegory works well.
Yeah, and even then, like they're all part of the same broader organization, to sort of see like what other roles they play. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But anyway, so and then you've got sort of the broad monolithic faces behind the judge there, the central one, central timekeeper and his two sort of compatriots, and then you've got
central timekeeper. You think one's more important than another? You're
I do. I think it's prediction. Right. I think there are a lot of call-outs. I think whether that's Kang, who knows? But we can talk about that later. But I think and then you've got the same joke, of the dramatic irony where the audience knows at this point that like, okay, TVA is clearly a bit more powerful than maybe like their facade. Like there's more than meets the eye here, but Loki still hasn't quite internalized it. Still thinks he has access to his powers, and still isn't quite taking them seriously.
And then in that courtroom is where he has his performance issues with the with the
rise to the occasion. Needs some blue chew or something. But he so yeah, you have all that, and then of course you have some unfitted.
Potent is a good word to use here because potent means power.
Yeah, no, that's one way to describe him in this scene. I do think that there was a bit of exposition there, obviously, with a bit more exposition with Judd saying that the Avengers were meant to do what they had done in games. So
Yes, and the thing just because it leads to the sentence that led into that is what I did like is this is the beginning, as I truly see it, of Loki starting to be what is intrinsically Loki is see the situation and manipulate it to his own advantage. One, he's trying to turn the judge against the Avengers, which is his enemy. Take an enemy and put it against my enemy. Like that's a classic. That's the sort of move you make. uh, why don't we assemble a task force which I could lead and then you put to my, you let, same play that the Battle of New York was, right? I can't remember exactly how it went down, but he had some sort of argument with Thanos or Thanos' herald beforehand, and he got him put in charge of a force as a proxy. So this is right out of his playbook. Um, and then the other thing that I quite liked in that scene was uh, well, no, let me say this. I'll say something different. I'll say something I didn't like in the scene, actually. He made all these arguments about how like it's the Avengers, should have this or that. I guess he did identify that the Avengers had time traveled, right? I think he said that. Um, I, I, I see in the scene. So here's what did I like it or did I not like it? It's complicated. He didn't mention the Infinity Stones or the Time Stone or anything in that scene, where like the situation was screaming out for him to mention them. And the reason that I think he did that, which I like, this is what I do like, is it was because I think while he was being haughty and saying like I am the god of mischief, the way I like to read it, which is a more reasonable reading because he's been put down so many times over and over and over again, room after room after room. Uh, uh, the way I do like to read it is he didn't think that he was the one with power there, but he knew what true power was,
so the Trump
and he
card.
believed it to be the Infinity Stones, and so he was keeping them in his back pocket.
Didn't want to reveal his secret.
Didn't want to reveal it. Didn't want to play his hand.
Yeah.
Because that situation was screaming out for him to say Infinity Stones or something, and they're not addressed a little bit later. I think it's because he's like, okay, well, I think these guys are actually legitimately powerful, and my powers has got a mischief. I mean, for God's sake, for goodness sake, he's less powerful than Thor, the God of Thunder's brother. He really doesn't think he's all that. He gets his ass handed to him. He got his ass handed to him throughout his entire childhood by Thor, and not so long ago in the Battle of New York. So it's not that I think he was haughtiness of his own power. It was the haughtiness is the knowledge of what the seed of power is in the universe, being the stones.
Being Loki, which is Loki knows his main tool. The main tool in his in his repertoire. I mean, he is deception. Is his ability to sort of deceive and to put forth illusions, and that's what he. So he's like he's not like you said, he's not playing his hand. I think he's like keeping secrets best kept for now because he's like his trump card, obviously what he's got in his back pocket still, at least he believes to have his back pocket, is the Infinity Stone.
Yeah.
So and the audience I also like for all I knew at that point watching it was like, yeah, I mean once Loki gets an Infinity, like and his hands on back on the Infinity Stone, like who knows what's all hell is gonna break loose. TVA is not gonna hit him, but of course we see what happens later with that. But yeah, no, it was quick scene. Well done that you have, the sort of obviously what's going to be the central dynamic and relationship in this miniseries moving forward between Loki and Mobius.
Owen Wilson's character,
Officer Mobius. What was his name? Officer Mobius.
Mobius, yeah. Slow Mobius.
Mobius is his name. But
yeah. So Loki. So Owen Wilson stands up. I'm trying to say now is the time to talk about what was driving that decision to save Loki. And I know we know why, but more important. No, let's just move on. We've got this. So Owen Wilson saves him, and he brings him to the room where he starts interrogating him, asking him questions. For the way he was behaving, seemed to be treating him far too nicely. but also treating him nicely, asking him questions, and then playing back some of the memories or moments in his life, right?
Yeah, you've got Owen Wilson sort of, yeah, Mobius is essentially kind of like clearly the person in power because he's being maddeningly like calm and not quite passive aggressive exactly, but just like he's clearly in control. He's not stressed out or like he knows what's going on, and that is frustrating to Loki. And he keeps asking Loki these like fairly probing questions, but not in an aggressive way. Both the combination of the way those questions are asked and the questions themselves, like, do you enjoy hurting people? Like all these sort of like getting to Loki's sort of psychopathy, or at least like, how he presents himself to the world is
And
is interesting. Yeah.
and the,
Asked,
and so he's asking these questions, and very much I think this was two goals: is what's the character doing, and then what's the purpose of this for the audience. Loki has been a villain in the show, and what he's done in New York, just for the audience to be on the side, is pretty unforgivable. And so, of course, it's a central kind of question of probably the whole show, but even episode one, we are asking, is Loki a good guy or a bad guy? And in that vein of the audience wondering, what's Loki going to be in the series, Owen Wilson is demanding, do you enjoy hurting people? I think is the question he's asking.
yeah.
And that's kind of trying to get at that.
Yeah.
I thought the tape and the way it was done and displayed on the wall, I thought it was fairly displayed on the wall, hologram, whatever it was. I thought it was fairly strong. The greatest hits or whatever they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was interesting. It was, it's they had to find, now this was like kind of like,
Then you get those good nostalgia points, man. You get those references, get those callbacks, those little, oh, I know that, and then that little bit of rush when you see something from a movie you've seen before.
Yeah, it was you get those, you get right the callbacks, you get you have a further sort of establishment of the context. You have to sort of remind the audience again that, like, wow, we first saw Avengers and we're experiencing this version of Loki 9 years ago at this point. This is that same Loki. Loki is fresh off of that event. Like, this is the genocidal Loki that this is not the Loki that you saw sort of grow over the course of multiple films after the Avengers and become a more sympathetic and heroic figure. But
he's never
Loki
became fully good. He's anti-hero. I think is the best you could.
Sure,
but went from full villain to anti-hero. Big improvement.
He's just coming off a truly genocide. Is like the peak of his villainy.
Yeah.
And you have to sort of remind people of that, and that's the sort of burden of this episode. And
is get people on this guy's side in some way.
Get him on this guy. Remind people where this, like, who this version of Loki is, where he is in his personal arc, and then sort of recharacterize him almost like not do all of the work, but much of the work that was done over the course of years and years and years in multiple films over the course of an episode. So, which was tough to do. I think it did it maybe as reasonably as well as one could have hoped, given like what the ask was or what the necessity was. But it was interesting. You saw his, like you said, his greatest hits up to a certain point, and then of course you had sort of like the setting of those, like the foundation of those questions and his response, his like initial characterization of the TVA, which is to say like it's a massive illusion, like created by the weak.
I liked that, him yelling illusion thing. Of all the lines, it was a good one.
Which of course, it circles right back around later on in the episode. But it's a good scene, kind of reestablishes the TVA as this omniscient, overseeing authority. Kind of Loki seems to start internalizing somewhat, though again, he still believes he does have some. He's flailing a bit, but he's starting to flail a bit and truly realize what's going on. But he still believes he does have that sort of final trump card. So like this. More to
he's still got something in his back pocket,
but he still thinks,
and we know there's there's 6 of them, and we know what it is he thinks he's got in his back pocket.
Right.
But a couple points I want to make on this scene real quick. One, there was a couple times where Owen Wilson was kind of interesting. He like said things that like felt wrong or sounded wrong, where he was like being very deliberately antagonistic. I think it was kind of him playing his own one man good cop bad cop. He calls Loki a pussycat at some point. I don't know if you remember. By the way, he's like, "Oh, I hunt dangerous variants," and he's like, "Oh, blah blah blah." He's like, "No, you're just a pussycat." Which also, knowing later in the series, later in this same episode, well, that doesn't scan at all, right? Is this guy fucking dangerous or not, right? Because you can't call him.
Yeah.
Or are we just being antagonist to be antagonistic when you know he's definitely not a pussycat, according to you,
When you
sir.
get a reaction.
Yeah, just get a reaction. Uh, here's a bit where he puts up a thing from the Avengers, and they like, I think it's the bit where Hawkeye's got the bow trained on him, and the Avengers are all brandishing their weapons just behind him. And if it's all the same to you, I'll take that drink now.
Right.
And he says something to the effect of like, "Yes, I remember," but it was said in a way, and maybe this is such a me being finicky, is in a way of like something that happened, like he is actually like having to remember it.
Oh, I took it as
It's
like
been
him
an
being
hour.
sarcastic. I took it as him being
It's been an
sarcastic.
hour, right? It's that just happened.
I took it as him being sarcastic because he was almost calling it out, and Circuit was like, "Yes, I remember." Like,
Oh,
literally.
right. Okay.
That's how I took it.
That
I don't
makes
know.
more
Maybe I
sense.
have to rewatch it to be honest, but like,
Yeah,
I took it
yeah,
as him Loki being sardonic and saying like, "Yeah, I remember. No, like, I didn't forget this massive event that happened occurred in my life just an hour ago."
yeah. Because it's right. It just happened. That's right.
Yeah.
Very.
And his
What
timeline
he
had
gets
happened.
arrested and put downstairs. I don't think. I think it's not been an hour since
Yeah.
that moment. That line was said.
Very, very recent.
Which is just so funny to think about. If you, I wouldn't have been against them like mentioning it in like more real terms. I wish at some point he was like haughty, and the judge said, um, like if I'm an immortal god, blah blah, and the judge said something like, a small group of mortals, uh, incarcerated you or captured you, defeated and captured you, 57 minutes ago.
Right.
I thought him being DB Cooper was great.
Yeah. Yeah. The DB Cooper thing was a nice touch. It also sort of like, reminded the audience of the fact that, yeah, like we were introduced to Loki in 2011, but he's 1,500 years old. So like he and Thor have had Thor, Odin, that family had a long history that we and interaction with Midgard, Earth, or whatever, that we're not a party to. We don't know.
So it's funny on one hand, and the other thing that I think is the main thing that it does for us is it establishes he, has been to Earth, knows Earth customs. It's not just the few days of the Avengers 1 that he's been there for. It's he has a long history as an immortal or whatever he is, as Guardian, and so I think that was a very important thing to kind of mention, that he's been around the block, and if he it's also like a nod, like in the series we references something from a couple years back, it's a 70s reference, or says something like he's allowed to because he has been around. He didn't I know he's been like lived longer. What I think it established, which I wasn't so sure of, is that he had been to Earth prior to 2012. I didn't know that. I knew he'd been living, but I didn't know he had been. But of course, and then the Rainbow Bridge is how he could have done that. Yeah.
I assumed that there was an assumption. I had the assumption that, like, given that in the MCU, Nordic mythology had been born of these real figures that did exist in an Asgard in something, and so like there had been some.
Oh yeah, I should have said I didn't think the Asgardians had come back to Earth since the
whenever that happened. I mean, who knows, right? That's the thing. It just reminds us that there's
1000
swathe of time that, like, it's like that we are that there's a lot to mine or potentially sort of use there. But and also just again, probably pretty deliberate choice that fit with the 60s, 70s aesthetic. DB Cooper happened in the early 70s.
Yeah, of all the choices, DB Cooper. Should we move on to? Well, I guess we should talk about the scene where Loki escapes briefly, and using the time twister, and bumps into Pillboy.
Yeah. So. Right, Loki, which I did appreciate, is like finally kind of like after being kicked around the entire episode, he does assert his authority, or his ability to find his way out of tricky situations, and his cunning, and kind of gets some of his revenge on the self-important lackey, the TVA foot soldier, flips the tables and puts her in the time twister, or in the collar, and then, like you said, runs around in search of what he believes to be his trump card, the true seat of power of the universe, as you've characterized it, being, one of the Infinity Stones, the Space Stone, or the Tesseract, as it still is, at this point. Finds Pillboy, threatens him.
Got you like a fish. What's a fish? That was funny.
It's like a bit of a funny interaction there, and then of course Pillboy shows him. He's like, doesn't seem to care. Like, has no sort of, again, because it was
that's so well done.
Doesn't seem to care. It's like, and you're starting to think like, okay,
it's not like this is like he's a minimum wage security guard, and at least the one rule he knows is, you can't let anyone get the stones.
So
he doesn't even care. He spells it out for a threat that he doesn't understand. Yeah. He spells out infinity.
Like, yeah, sure, I'll give you a paper weight.
For whatever you're describing. Yeah, that sounds unideal.
Yeah. And then, of course,
which one do you want?
The most powerful shot of probably of the episode, which is this, this drawer that's opened up and everything's just like scattered around these like keepsakes. You've got like this Honus Wagner like baseball card. You've got some other things in there. You've got like, it's like these very valuable items, and of course the most valuable within the MCU and most powerful, at least as far as we've been told so far. These Infinity Stones, multiple of the same kind of Infinity Stones.
Yes, so many of them,
and they're just like scattered. They're not piled in any way. They're just scattered around. Such a bunch of paper clips, got some Infinity Stones there.
The way they're not even in like a single nice pile in the middle of the drawer. There's like there's like a bunch pushed up to one side. Yeah. I mean, it was just so well done, so nonchalant, so uncaring. And even for like the prop designers, whoever was designing the scene, you think like it's just so important to us that it's hard for us to not make that central. But the way they did that was just brilliant.
That was well done.
And they didn't look so mundane. They still glowed. I don't even notice that they were glowing.
A little bit.
It's just so well done. And of course, for Loki, his big, back pocket, like the big secret he's had, is just worthless here. It's, he thought he knew what was what, and he just doesn't.
Yeah. You realize that what he believed his trump card to be his trump card the entire time, they were aware of the entire time. And they just,
it wasn't even worth mentioning to them.
Yeah.
And then for the audience, the power ranking of the universe, the assembled Infinity Gauntlet has to be what we've understood to be the most powerful thing. It was the apex, and it just gets pushed down so much by the TVA, with the fact that not only is there an assembled, they're all six, there were many versions of that, and we can make them not work. It seemed like the kind of thing from which we've understood is that the Infinity Gauntlet or the Infinity Stones gathered together, nothing could stop that from working. Like, there is no power that could suppress or kill. It's just them brought together. That's it. Many versions of them, and they don't work, and this and that, and it's just a great moment to reset our expectations, our understanding of this kind of cinematic universe for this new phase.
Yeah, everything about that scene was kind of mutually reinforcing, or just spoke to the art direction, the timing, the jokes, all reinforced, were meant to sort of highlight the fact that yes, what you believe to be, the most powerful object, or like around the things around which like the entire MCU sort of revolved and was fixated on for the past 10 years. That's nothing. Like, here's and just it was a great way to sort of, it wasn't exposition, it was a great way to show,
don't tell.
So it was well done. And it was very pivotal. Obviously, it was the sort of defining moment of the episode, and sort of where Loki truly starts to like
and his attitude changes, because that's the moment where he's not believing he knows what's up. He and then you see him defeated in that room. I don't know, Olsen walks in. If you don't mind me, I think this is the next thing we should talk about. And he's like, and he tried using it several times.
And finally lays out this idea. Okay, yes, the TVA is formidable. Like, that there is something going on here that I don't truly understand yet. And what we start to see then is Loki probably becoming the Loki that we know. Is like, okay, like, I understand now that there is something here that I have yet to truly comprehend, but I'm going to try to. I'm going to try to comprehend. And the best way to do that right now is just play along and see what's happening. Which, of course, Owen Wilson acknowledges, or Mobius acknowledges in the prior scene. He says, like, isn't this your shtick, is to sort of like, is to betray, play along and then betray authority, of course. So Mobius knows what Loki's deal is, and Loki knows that Mobius knows that, so we'll see exactly who sort of in this chess match, like who comes out on top. But yeah, it's the now you have like the foundation for the next 5 episodes. Truly, so okay, TVA is this. They are extremely powerful. Loki is bitten over his head, but at least he's aware of it now, and you've got the central relationship of.
And what do you think of the scene
Loki
where
and Mobius.
Loki's kind of sort of breaking down and
Yeah, well, him coming back and
why do you
actually
hurt people?
watching, and that's something we sort of missed because that happens
Yes,
before even Mobius comes back. Is him watching
his own death.
through Thor: The Dark World and
Death of his mother, death of his father, and then his death.
right, and then into Ragnarok, and then into Infinity War when he dies, and sort of him seeing right his own progression, people he loves dying, and of course him dying, and truly sort of seeing, okay, this is like in my path before this, I was essentially like a forcing mechanism for other people. I caused pain and I caused other people to become better versions of themselves. That's all I was. I wasn't.
That's what Owen Wilson says. You think?
Oh yes, but like I think Loki starts to realize that he almost like there's a very sort of meta way to view this. It's almost like Loki's realizing that he's a supporting character in these other in his previous path. He was again like a forcing function, like a foil to cause other people to become better versions of themselves, and not an actual sort of like a true central figure of So like he almost started to realize like how not ancillary, but like how like he was not sort of almost the primary character in his own story going forward. So he has to come to grips with that. And he's like he dies without truly realizing anything that any part of his vision.
And he never fulfills the destiny that he thought
that he thought right.
The last moving on, the last thing is in this scene and is talking with Owen Wilson. Owen Wilson has the big reveal,
right, which is that the dangerous variant that they've been having to deal with, and
the variant is you or something.
Yeah, it's you. It's it is another Loki, and which is obviously explains why Mobius singled out Loki as someone to save from whatever.
Actually, I'll talk about this for a second, because I think you're much further ahead and you've got like good predictions and stuff. I don't have so much. I'm not
making predictions. I'm just saying it informs why Mobius in the courtroom.
So that's something I want to talk about. If the variant is you, I don't understand why Owen Wilson was saving Loki, and I don't understand how he was able to have a quick call with that police officer, and that was and she's like, oh, reticent, like, oh, okay, or the judge, or both those conversations, really, actually. And they're like, oh, okay, we guess you can question him, whatever. This guy, or a variant of this guy, is killing the TVA officers. He said, what was it? It was like, this is the 10th squad he's taken out in a week or something.
Right.
Also, by the way, I'm not going to lie, flipping killed me that they said in a week. Like, what the hell does a week mean?
Right.
And time works differently here.
Right.
The Wilson says that all the time.
Yeah, right.
Of all the things they could have, they could have said this is the 10th one or something. 10th one in a week. Did you have to say in a week?
Yeah.
That killed me.
There'll be a lot of inconsistencies there with the colloquialisms that they use.
I know, but they could have said this is the 10th one.
Wouldn't it seem to apply?
Or he said, or they're becoming more frequent or something. You can do ways around it. Anyway, I digress. It seems way too casual that Owen Wilson was able to talk to Loki. It's like if there was let's think about the equivalent. There's a guy, a terrorist on Earth, who was taken out, was it 10 squads or 7 squads? Several squads.
Something like that.
Of police officers, right? Like squad E officers. Squads. And whatever, like his brother gets brought in, right? It would be the highest authority possible. It would be like, this isn't a laughing matter. This is huge. I guess the thing that they could establish is like Owen Wilson deals with this often, that people killing squads of TVA officers is like actually common. It doesn't feel like it at all with their power, their time travel ability. It really doesn't scan for me. But Owen Wilson gets to talk to Loki, just a variant, just a hop, skip, and a jump away from the guy who's causing this. Far too easily. It seemed like, I guess, shucks. Maybe if it was something like oh, you've interacted with the person, and therefore we want to know what you
Yeah.
know about them. Maybe then, but he's like
So
the same guy, or just
I don't think we truly know. I don't think we know the true underlying reason. I think the nominal reason, or the reason that we've been exposed to as to why Mobius singled out Loki to sort of keep him from summary execution, to like bring him into this investigation, scans enough. It's like, yeah, who better to
Oh,
capture
I
the end
know,
of
I
the
know
narrative
why
than
Owen
another
Wilson would
Loki?
have wanted to do
But
it. It's the fact
but
that he was
the
allowed to do it so easily.
I think the underlying, I think there's more that I think there's sort of
Yeah,
different
there's just more to it.
there's more motivation going on, and I'm sure we'll be exposed to later on. There's more going on that like that that informs that decision, and there are probably higher powers that be that are then sort of like causing these things to
Yeah.
happen and causing sort of the red tape to be wiped away. Like,
And then
your
another
thoughts?
question I want to ask, and I mean this one because anytime you see this, anytime in a show or film or something, there's like a last page, final page reveal, and the final page has a silhouette or it's had a hooded figure without the face revealed. It immediately makes me think, okay, well, it's not whatever ever the hell they think it is, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm
If
sure
the
they're
face
going
is
to.
revealed, I'm like, oh, they said
Right.
it's Loki, and if it ended there, then I've been like, okay, dope, it's Loki. But then they reveal him without showing his
Yeah,
face. I'm like,
Chekhov's
okay,
hooded
so it's
face.
someone
Yeah,
posing as Loki. Like, what the fuck
yeah,
is this about?
yeah. Chekhov's hooded face. I mean, like it's clearly
Chekhov's
not going to
hooded
be.
face. If you see a hooded face in the last shot of the first
Yeah,
episode,
that face will
you
have been
know it's
hooded for
not
some
whoever
reason.
they've been
Yeah,
identified
yeah.
as,
No, I mean it's either. So I have some
right?
speculation on that. It's either, which I think now that we're at the end, we have all this information.
Yeah.
I think we can start to speculate a bit. I think if it's not Loki,
Speculation.
it could not be Loki just entirely. It just couldn't be, or it could be some multiversal version of Loki that's not Tom Hiddleston in some one respect or another. It could
Interesting.
be Lady Loki, maybe. It could be,
I like that.
who knows? But so but I'm sure we'll come to understand what that is and what that person's. I have like a very strong feeling, of course, like maybe, hopefully, maybe my expectations will subvert. My expectation is that obviously TVA is something that Loki will insidiously sort of like he will sort of get it. He'll I don't know, he'll permeate into, he'll find his way through the cracks and crevices of his organization to the powers that be, the central seat of power within this TVA, and then
The
also
timekeepers.
the timekeepers, or
Who,
something
as I
similar.
mentioned before, I think is seems to be, what do I know? An allegory to the oh my goodness, the Living Tribunal.
Maybe, I mean, they could be. So timekeepers were real. There were like three timekeepers that were separate in the comics universe from the Living Tribunal, although like
And what
they're
comics did they
reminiscent of
show
each
up
other.
in?
What?
What which of the kind of properties or titles would
I
that have
mean,
been?
apparently a few. There was like
Oh,
the
apparently
Fantastic
two.
Four, like apparently escaped
Fantastic Four would make sense.
from them. Kang did actually sort of was a separate being from the Timekeepers in the Incomics universe, and actually sort of had an antagonistic
Well,
relationship.
of course. I mean, doesn't I? Yeah. So me without any movie knowledge, like like Kang got cast, like me without any movie knowledge, like cinematic universe knowledge outside of the the canon, I would have guessed with with my comic book knowledge and the movie knowledge I've seen, Kang is the obvious choice for the person killing these people. I mean, that sounds just like Kang. I mean, that's Kang.
Yeah,
So when they said it was Loki, I was like, oh, that's crazy. Okay, so we're gonna be hunting a second variant of maybe Loki. This will be the villain Loki, and we'll have a hero Loki, and that's how it's gonna happen. But then as soon as they show that hooded face, I'm like, okay, so it's back to Kang again. We're back to Kang, right?
I think I
It's gonna be
so
Loki. They didn't show him.
I still believe so. Again, going to the like, there's a few pieces of information that that lead me to believe that Kang is, now that they've kind of, because it's like the MCU sort of retcon things and rejoin things, just like the Cosmic Cube and the Space Stone in the comics were two separate things. They joined them together. I believe that the Timekeepers and Kang, they've like joined together. They're both sort of their central sort of defining aspect is time. Like Kang lives and rules over the
Sure.
timeless
So go
city in
on.
the quantum realm. We saw the timeless city in and two. Kang is the central villain in Ant-Man Quantumania. I believe this is. I believe that the TVA and um, and the Timekeepers and Kang are all very closely intertwined, if not essentially the same in some respects. And I mean, so another sort of piece of evidence I think fits that
So you
actually,
think Kang is a timekeeper?
I do believe that
He's one of the 3 timekeepers.
here's some other sort of things that seem to back that up, or at least sort of like circumstantially kind of support it to some degree. I think so. In that animation they show where they actually showed the timekeepers themselves and what they look like, or some artistic rendition of them.
Look like, yeah, look like. It's a cartoon.
They have, the central timekeeper there is blue skin, which of course Kang is. Kang is blue skin, and they have the depiction of him. The artist depiction of him looks very similar to what Jonathan made. Jonathan Majors is a kind of distinctive look. He has some sort of like profile and features.
The guy who got cast as Kang.
Guy who got cast as Kang. He was the main central character in played the central character in Lovecraft's Country, an HBO Max show. But he got cast as Kang in Ant-Man Quantumania. This depiction of him looks very similar, and similarly, the sort of monolithic face that was sitting behind the judge,
the statue, the sculpture,
also like of the central timekeeper, it looked very, very similar to Kang. Again, so I think like there's a lot of dominoes aesthetically, thematically,
is a
narratively
descendant of like Reed Richards, right? That's the comic book version.
Yeah, the comic
or
version is like right.
Of Doom, or maybe both, because you have.
Yeah, it's like a descendant of like Reed Richards from like the 3rd millennium or something.
Yeah.
Or something late in the 3rd millennium or something along those lines. Who then like essentially becomes this extremely powerful figure. But I think that there's a lot of dominoes being lined up here aesthetically, narratively, from a non-diegetic perspective, like from the casting itself, all these other things that like, and thematically, like the theme of like time and multiverse, all seem to line up, and like the way in which these like the links in this the Marvel Cinematic Universe chain, I think it lines up well. Now it could not be.
No, I hear you. I hear those that
I think if I had to guess, they're setting up Kang to be the next Thanos, or the Thanos, essentially like the next overarching villain of the next decade potentially, or the next few phases of Marvel films. Like he's going to make these appearances. And we know that the multiverse is going to play a very key role in the
we're already seeing it from WandaVision.
We got Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness.
Multiverse of Madness coming. Not yet, we haven't seen, but
Spider-Man films. In Spider-Man films, like the multiverse will play a significant role. I wouldn't be surprised if, now this is true speculation, but you heard it here first. Not here first. I'm sure plenty of other people have said it, but the Secret Wars is something I wouldn't be surprised come into the fore as a future Avengers. Maybe not the next Avengers film, maybe one after that, but some crossover property will. It's too well known.
I'd love a Secret Wars film, man.
It's too like rich with like dramatic. It's too rich with dramatic opportunity, and the opportunity to bring back characters, opportunity, like all these things. They have to do it, and the setting the stage for the multiverse and playing with time, playing with different versions of the same character, and Kang being a central part of that. Now, of course, I believe the Beyonder was technically the sort of puppet master when it came to the Secret Wars. I think, is that correct in comics?
Is the Beyonder? Yeah.
Maybe Kang will either take the place of the Beyonder, or the Beyonder will also play a central, but Kang will, so who knows? But very sort of broad, high-level picture that this is just saying a very sort of initial, like it's a glint in the MCU's eyes of what could potentially be. I think that's what I see happening here. But I'm not sure if the Hooded Figure's Kang. I don't think so. Maybe I do believe within just the context of Loki, not thinking about the rest of the MCU, but there's clearly a larger conspiracy going on. There's hidden motivations going on here. As to why sort of Loki was particularly singled out and who this character actually is. And I believe Loki and this hooded figure will probably end up teaming up in some way to undermine and take down the TVA, if I had to guess.
Sure.
Off the top of my head. That's if I had to guess. And, maybe Mobius ends up being, he had almost like this flirtatious relationship with the judge. Maybe he's Kang. No, maybe he's one of the time, who knows? But like, you could throw a bunch of crazy theories.
Oh, he's not Kang because we know he's Owen Wilson. Got it. Yeah.
But
I was going to say that'd be interesting, but no, we know he's. Yeah. But, I hate that it's known that it's cast. Why the fuck? Even if it is cast, why did you possibly reveal that? Don't reveal that. So I love to have watched this and thought, oh shit, is Owen Wilson Kang? I love that.
Right. No, but yeah, I mean, well, he could be just like just like Colin Farrell was technically Grindelwald, but Grindelwald was actually cast as Johnny Depp in the Harry Potter continuations of the Fantastic Beasts series. So who knows? Um, yeah, I think there's clearly a lot more than meets the eye here. I think there's some conspiratorial, like something happening behind the scenes underneath the surface, and we'll see what happens. That's my sort of very broad thoughts in like and within the confines of Loki, my thoughts on that. What about you? Any sort of like theories or predictions or general sort of takeaways from the first episode?
I'm very bad at this sort of thing, and I don't like doing it. But Loki is sorry. Hooded Figure's Kang. Fuck you.
Let's make a bet. Let's.
I'm very likely to lose. I'm not good at this.
Who knows? Who knows? But
Um,
no access to the pool or hot tub once you get to New York.
let's wrap up with one thing. Rating out of 10.
Sure.
Integers only.
Got it. Okay.
I think I know what I'd give the show. That episode.
Okay. Do you want me to go first, or do you want
to? You go first.
Okay. I would give, just integers. I would give Loki an 8. Very solid.
8. Loki 1, right? Not the whole show.
Yeah, no. I mean, just the pilot.
Loki 1. I would also give. There was a lot of good. The only flaws were the tirings and the jokes, the slight mischaracterization of Loki. A couple lines were a little off, but performances, production value, balancing the needs to exposition, bringing in new content, and the good amount of callbacks. It definitely brings over a very, very robust first episode. I don't know if they're gonna be able to continue that. I think they get a lot of points from like kind of callbacks, which if they keep relying on callbacks, then that'll really weaken the show. I think you can do that a lot in like the first episode and in the last. But if that's the whole show, then that's gonna get old quickly. So I don't know if they can keep this up. I'd love it if they can. It's not like WandaVision where I watched and I was like, okay. I watched episode 1. I was like, I think they can keep this quality.
It's only 6 episodes. I think there's probably the central mystery here and the detective story that this play is going to revolve around, and Loki's burgeoning relationship both with Mobius and with presumably this hooded figure, who I'm sure the identity will be revealed in the next episode after. There's enough fuel there, I think, to keep it interesting and going for 6 episodes, for 5 more. I mean,
I certainly hope they can maintain it. I hope they can build off it. But I think it's a very strong, very robust start. Very enjoyable. I personally was not a big Falcon Winter Soldier fan, so I am happy to see something that I'm kind of this excited. Excited that about. I'm excited that I'm this excited for the next episode. I am happy to be in the Marvel TV universe. I was a little afraid after just a couple months, maybe a month ago. I was like, oh no, is WandaVision like the peak, and we're not really gonna have no chance of hitting that again. I am happy that I'm in the state I am today. Looking forward to the rest of the show.
Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, the burden of this first episode really was to set the stage for the remaining 5. So it was sort of provide the context, provide sort of the new world, the rules, to reestablish who Loki is, both within this iteration of Loki, who he is, and then to recharacterize him, also not quite catch him up to the 2017 version, the Infinity War version of Loki. But that was their own thing. That was the one part of it that was essentially kind of like they had to squeeze all that into a very short period of time, and they did that in as probably as deft a way as they could given the constraints. And now that was essentially the part of this episode, and they did it well. They did very well. There weren't a lot of action set pieces, and there didn't need to be. When you have Tom Hiddleston and writing that's as competent as it was, that was certainly enough to keep it more entertaining in many ways than many of the set pieces that Falcon Winter Soldier was full of. So, but yeah, I agree.